Hello and welcome to ThisConnect. Today we're talking about what should be considered a niggle and what should become a deal breaker when you're buying a new car or motorcycle.
Something's got to be, you've got to be in your bonnet, clearly.
No, it's not a bee in my bonnet thing. I think people are making these decisions for the first time. In many cases, they've only made this decision once before. And I think sometimes they're not able to judge what is a minor issue that you live with and the rest of the vehicle is so good that it doesn't really matter, and what is actually a major issue. Because if you think about it, the way the content world is working right now, all the negatives are highlighted more because it brings traffic. So a lot of niggles look like deal breakers. But are they?
Okay.
Right? Have you not owned motorcycles, for example, that have fundamental vibration?
Right.
But have you not enjoyed those motorcycles despite the vibration because they do something else really well?
It's very often that people find small things and gets blown out of proportion and becomes a cause for worry and maybe changing decisions.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's the same with cars also, I think. You guys have a lot of features in your car, and it's a large spread of features. It's a large number of variants. And small things are blown out of proportion to, if nothing else, to try and distinguish, is this a variant worth considering or not? And then you'll take some small menial thing and you'll turn it into a mountain, right?
I think the bigger issue with cars actually is that people look past a lot of the small stuff thinking, theek hai. And those are actually the deal breakers, which that they should be paying attention
Correct.
to.
So I'm saying it's the same thing for me, right?
Okay.
It is whether you're taking a small thing and making it into so big, or you're taking a big issue and not recognizing that this is a big issue and thinking it is small. In either case, you made an error of judgment that is going to cost you 6 months down the line, 8 months down the line, 10 months down the line. And I want to basically say you can make better decisions for which you have to think for yourself. You have to know yourself and your expectations and what constitutes a luxury, what constitutes useful, what constitutes pointless, what constitutes there's no reason to have one of these in my life. Like, for example, let's take a example that people will immediately have a fight over, right? Android versus Apple. Like, you know that I use the Apple ecosystem almost exclusively, and I recognize it's an ecosystem and they've built the walls and it's very hard to leave, blah, blah, blah. I get it. But Apple said something at the beginning which made sense to me, which is this is not a device that should take over your life. It's a device that should enable your life and you should be able to do stuff with it. So when an Android guy says, I have a much more flexible phone and I can do so many things with it, makes no difference to me. That's not what I want in my life. I'm not sitting there to code my phone.
Correct.
Right? It has enough flexibility in the Apple system that I need to operate my things. And between my iPad and my watch and my phone and my laptop, the way the things transfer between these four objects, that's exactly how I wanted to transfer. I have more expectations from Apple, but they are the features that I really gravitate towards. And to me, therefore, paying that kind of money is worth it. And over the last, 10, 15 years of using Apple devices, they have done the jobs that I want these devices to do. So I think the money I have paid for these, it's not unjustified.
So you're saying fewer but better.
Yeah, is one way to look at it, right? It depends on your perspective. There will be people who say, no, I want a lot. And if all of that is relatively low quality, I am okay with that.
This analogy actually will work very well for cars.
Yeah.
Especially what you brought up about features. Right?
Correct.
And people are genuinely thinking these days that more features makes a better car.
No.
It's easy to tick off those boxes on a brochure, and you see the ridiculous stuff that gets added on a car brochure today. It's insane.
Correct.
It'll be like split headlamps. Okay, how does it make my life better?
Yeah.
Chrome piping on the DLO, stuff like that. Okay, man, you want to talk about what you've done on the car. Good for you, but people are buying into this and saying that, "Arey, usme ye hai, usme ye nahi hai." The day the chrome piping becomes blacked out, that also comes like this.
Correct.
Blacked out.
And the fear of missing out you're implying, I think, should be focused on the idea that I could have been outside doing something else. Instead, I'm sitting here in front of a screen, fretting over whether there is chrome on my DLO or not. There has to be a better way than this, right? In the last year, we've had some fantastic motorcycles come as the 400cc segment grew, right? And I suppose we've also participated in the making sure you understand what this bike does well and badly. So if you take the example of the Speed 400, for example, up to 105, it's not an unpleasant motorcycle. Beyond 105, there is vibration, there is a sense of strain, which to me is unexpected. I've set the agenda very clearly. If you're not a fast rider, there is no reason why the Speed 400 will not make sense in your life. But if you intend to go fast because you saw the 40 bhp on the spec sheet and then you correlated it to the 2.3 lakh rupees and all of that, then accessing those 40 bhp on a regular basis, whether you can do it or not, given our traffic or not, it's not going to be pleasant. That's the expectation I'm setting. But in theory, a 30 bhp bike could give you the same feeling as the Speed 400, because if you're not a fast rider, the next 5 bhp, 10 bhp is not going to make any difference to you anyway. It's just a number on a spec sheet.
Correct.
Right? I've been riding the Himalayan regularly, and the Himalayan has a very even spread of torque from the bottom to the top. It doesn't really have a place where it is weak. It has places where the vibration is less and vibration is high. But we've got 3,300 kilometers on this Himalayan now. It's been through its first service. I've tried normal fuel and premium fuel, and there is a minor difference in the vibration. It's slightly less vibey than the initial because the engine has settled in a little bit, and first service.
Was there any change after the service?
Slight. Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm not thinking about the vibration of this bike on a regular basis anymore anyway. I know it's there. And if I were to go from here to Kolhapur, which is from here a 330-40 kilometer run, I know on the other side my hands will be slightly buzzed. But I'm enjoying so many other aspects of this motorcycle that I don't think as an owner, you will think that the Himalayan's vibration is a major issue. You will think of it as room for improvement, and you hope that Royal Enfield gives a better bike to the next customer. Will you reject this bike 6 months down the line saying, man, it vibrates so much, I wasted my money? I don't think so. But look at the amount of noise the vibration has created. Right? The noise the vibration has created. I like it. It's all refinement, right? So
It's really become an issue?
Yeah.
Okay.
It would, right? Because look, our expectation is butter smooth hona chahiye. It should not make any vibration at all, which a single cylinder motorcycle can do up to a limited amount of performance. Correct. After that, it has to vibrate if it has to give you more performance. Is the same problem with heat? How many questions do we get saying, does this bike heat up? Well, it's an ICE engine. It is going to heat up. Yeah. In a car, you have a firewall protecting you from all of that heat. On a bike, you don't have that luxury. So your feet are next to the catcon. The engine is between your knees. The radiator is ahead of your knees blowing air at your feet. And the damn thing runs on heat. What else is going to happen? In the Multistrada's case, which now we are talking about a 35 lakh rupee motorcycle, they had so much body work.
Multi's 35 now?
On road, yeah. So they had so much body work that when they could relocate the radiators, they could work with the airflow and create a motorcycle that is reasonably a cool running motorcycle for an engine that size. But in traffic, even that heats up somewhat, right? But if I were to give you a 170 bhp Multistrada and say, go ride, take it for a month, have fun with it, you'll tell me that it runs so hot I can't use it. So these are all made up boundaries that people are making. And why I'm getting upset is because I think there are good machines out there which will actually make you happy. And you're picking up some small, minute aspect of it, which after 3 months, even you won't notice. And you're turning it into this major issue saying, hey, this is a big deal. And you do the reverse also. Value for money.
Okay, before we go to money, when we're talking about these things, won't this also be contextual to who you are as a rider, right?
And I'm saying you're not aware of your context enough, and you're not paying attention to that aspect, right? You and me, we have similar riding experience in terms of the number of years we've spent. We have dramatically different preferences in terms of the kinds of bikes we gravitate towards. You think the Unicorn is a great bike. I thought the Unicorn was boring at the start, and we've begun there. In mid 2005 or something.
Correct.
We've always been on a different path, and that's why your garage and my garage will never resemble each other.
Correct.
The Duke was the only crossover, but if you remember, the 390 came out when nothing else was there.
Yeah.
There was no other way to get 45 bhp in your life, which both of us wanted. Today, the 400cc class gives you options. You tell me that today we would go shopping for a 400cc bike today, and we'd bring home the same bike. What are the chances?
Very little.
Yeah.
Except for the Duke, maybe.
No, again, the Duke, unfortunately for everybody else, has moved into a space where it is a singular thing, right? Correct. It is the most aggressive machine. It has 47 bhp now, etc., etc. It is still, I'm saying, leave the Duke aside. If you take the Duke aside and you look at everything from the NS 400Z, Speed 400, Scrambler 400X, Maverick, Harley Davidson, whatever. If you see this panoply of bikes, are you telling me that when we go to the showroom, we'll end up on the same?
What would you choose?
I am conflicted because the Maverick has the comfort qualities that I really enjoy, but it's not fast enough for me. The Scrambler 400X really appeals to me, but the Scrambler 400 goes up to 115, and after that it complains, and I don't like the complaining of it, right? But I am very specific. I know who I am. I like fast, sporty, aggressive machines. None of these are aggressive enough for me. I would go back to a Duke, and I'd go back to a Duke for one reason only. It is aggressive enough for my riding taste. And remember, we are both very skilled riders. It takes a lot to get us going. and we are able to extract a lot of performance from the engines and the chassis of these machines today, we would not settle for anything less.
Because I was also not being able to settle on one. As much as I like the idea of the 400X, and honestly, the 400X for me seemed like such a like as much I was not taken up by the speed at all.
Correct.
But I was taken up by the
Yeah,
400X,
me too.
right? But the vibrations, and it's that because you think it's a 40 horsepower bike,
Yeah.
and then you say, why can't I go above 100?
Correct. Without it complaining. You can, but why should it complain?
Yeah, why should it complain?
Exactly.
Right? That was for me. That became, for me personally,
Correct.
it became like a no, that's not okay. But at the same time, we were just talking about Colonel, right? And he's got one. He's got the 400X, and he's traveling all over the country on it,
Correct.
and he's happy with it.
Of
He's
course.
like, it's working for me.
Yeah.
So yeah,
But
so
he's chill, right? He's a relaxed rider where he thinks that staying at a steady 80, 90, 100 on the highway for hours together is the way that touring motorcycles need to work. My expectations are different. So again, Colonel and I will never buy the same bike again either.
yeah.
Right? So I'm saying when we present our views on MotorInc view, on balance, we have to work out what would work for a lot of people, and we try to give you as many decision parameters as we can so that you can make a good decision for yourself. But I think increasingly people get confused by the idea of saying ye important hai ya nahi hai, and they're prioritizing some of the wrong stuff. I mean, your car situation is crazy.
What would you say is one of the wrong things that
For example, when a review says the bike runs hot or it has too much vibration, to me that is a flag. That means go test ride it. Because these are both subjective assessments. How do you know what kind of vibration you're okay with and how much heat is okay for you? Right? I've ridden motorcycles a lot, and you know now that if I'm riding outside of testing, neither vibration nor heat really gets my goat. Would I rather not have them in my life? Yes, of course. But if there is vibration, there is heat, but the bike is doing something incredible and I'm feeling a great sense of joy, this is hardly the reason to say, man, this is terrible, I'm not going to ride this bike.
I think this is going back where it's clicking in for me is like when we did the new car, new bike conversations, first car, first bike conversations. It's like prioritizing what is important for you.
Yeah.
Right? Once you know what are the three things that really matter to you,
Correct.
and that is the bigger thing to focus on, then everything else will fall by the wayside. I mean, you will either learn to live with it, you will learn to love it, or you will make your peace with it. Whatever it is,
Correct.
it will happen. But you have to know what you want. I think what you're talking about right now is a fear driving a decision, or just that what we say that you can keep on worrying about your decision, that whether it's right or wrong. And there are so many things. And on bikes, I find that, I know we've spoken about this heat angle a lot, and I've always found it ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because first and foremost, we live in a country where 40 degrees is normal. As it is, whether you're on a bike, not just walking down the road, it gets hot enough.
Yeah.
And if I enjoy the experience enough, what does it matter? It really doesn't matter all that much. At the most, you're going to say, it's a little hot. I'll ride a little bit faster if I can. That's about it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to think about more than that. And I get, in the city, it's an issue. But will it change any decision? I mean, if you like the bike enough, no. So you have to know what you want, right?
No, and Kartik, I don't think the perfect bike exists, and I don't think it ever will. Can I tell you that I have 3 bikes today, okay? I have the KTM, the Tuono, and the Multi. Can I tell you that these 3 bikes have perfection? No. My KTM's ride quality, comfort levels are ridiculously low, right? The Tuono has no ground clearance. You can't ride it anywhere until you put it in the track setting, which is a higher setting, which is how I finally used it before it went to the racetrack and remained there, right? Is the Multistrada a size that you would conveniently use every day? No. But I think of these as the challenges I have to overcome to access the rest of these motorcycles, which is so amazing, right? The performance and the rawness of that KTM. I'm saying, do I choose that feeling which I like, or do I complain about the fact that it has no comfort? I'm okay. I'm okay with enjoying that motorcycle's qualities and living with that discomfort. It's a choice I make for me. I can't recommend the same to you, right? As a road tester, as an owner, I'm happy.
I think we might be giving marriage advice as well here. I'm getting that feeling now.
Look, I think in life, you're going to have to choose between pros and cons of everything that you're going to choose. If this causes paralysis, you're not helping anybody. Think about it like this, right? If when you're employed tomorrow in an organization, what are they really expecting you to do? Okay, I'm going to quote Rakesh Sharma from Bajaj here because he's put it so succinctly. He said, you're doing 3 things in every job: judgment, drive, and example. Judgment is the ability to make good decisions. Drive is to take initiative. And drive the course of your life, as it were. An example, which is, remember that you're setting an example for somebody or something constantly. I'm today setting an example of what an Indian citizen should be. When I shake hands with you in a public forum and you say, we love MotorInc, I am an example of MotorInc. I'm setting an example of what MotorInc needs to be. I need to talk like that, dress like that, etc. Right? So if you look at what your job description is, it is a matter of judgment, drive, and example. But if you can't make the decision, which is the first word in here,
Correct.
you're not going to be a valued employee. The promotions aren't coming, the increments aren't coming, because the first thing they expect you to do is decide.
Correct.
Right? Now you're going to say, okay, look, office is office. So if I decide something goes sideways, it's still the office. It's not my own. I don't know that I want to work with people who think like that. I want ownership, right? I want everybody at MotorInc to feel like MotorInc is as much it is theirs as it is ours. So when they make a decision, it's on our behalf for everybody's benefit, so that MotorInc and the audience and everybody can grow together. What else would be the point?
Okay.
What about the car thing? You keep saying that people pick up on things that are irrelevant and then completely lose focus on what really, really works. What happens? Give me an example.
I'm going to talk about one thing which people will not think about too much, and it's such an important thing. Seat cushioning, seat shape, right? People just look at it as, seat hai. And it's true, it looks good. It's got a good fabric on it. It's got leatherette upholstery, whatever. So it must be good. No. The cushioning is so important, and that's one of the things that I find so hard, that people have not yet realized what a big difference it makes to your entire experience in the car. So this one car we were testing, the first impression, we used to talk about Mahindra suspension. It was catered for first drives. I mean, first drives means test drives. It used to always have this soft plushness to it. So people used to get in and drive and think like, wow, this is so awesome. I can just go over speed breakers and I don't feel anything. But the trade-off was, when you really got moving and you spent more time with it, you realized that you would get jostled around a lot, which was a problem with older Mahindras and newer Mahindras, like the XUV and all. That's not the issue. But it used to be an issue. The same thing with the seats. When I see a car with seats that are too soft, I automatically start thinking that there's an issue somewhere else. There's a problem with the suspension. Because why do the seats have to be so soft? If you need cushioning, that should be coming from the suspension.
Correct.
Not from the seats.
Yeah.
The seats are meant to hold you in one place. And every time, think about this. I learned this when the classic 500 came.
I was just going to bring it up.
With the Springer seat, right?
Yeah.
And everybody thought it was so cool. And I just realized every time I got on it, I got tired way faster than I expected.
Yeah.
And when I thought about it, it clicked. It's because you're doing twice the movement for dealing with a bump.
Yeah.
It's the suspension and then the seat going up and down. So
Correct.
you're always getting that pain in your ass because it's just being hit twice, thrice. And that's the same thing with soft seats. Seating position is another great example. Why is a good seating position important? You won't know that until you spend a day covering 700, 800 kilometers in a car.
Yeah.
You don't realize that. People come and say, अरे गला दुखता है. तुमने पहले सीट ठीक से एडजस्ट की है? तुम्हारी गाड़ी की सीटिंग पोजीशन कैसे तुमको पता है?
Correct.
उसके it's like नहीं, ड्राइविंग में बहुत स्ट्रेन होता है. Then these are all the small things which you are invisible because you're effectively just ticking things off a list.
Correct.
Without considering what the experience is, because the car experience is practically today like your drawing room experience. Is it looking good? Does it have this? Will I enjoy listening to music? Do I have ADAS? And all that stuff. But is the driving experience good? There are so many things that will make you overlook all of that.
Yeah, but I think the drawing room analogy is actually a good one. You see, all the furniture in a drawing room is pointed at the television. So that's why we're getting bigger and bigger screens in cars so that we can point the seats at them. Eventually, they'll eliminate the driver so all occupants can be focused on the screen and not worry about the world outside.
So for sure, I think screens and the complexity of screens is something that we are only seeing now because not everybody gets screens right. It's not just the quality of
I think most people get screens wrong.
Yeah.
Let's be clear about this. UI UX design is a very complicated subject. Designing human interaction and having a logical flow to the interaction is really complicated. And most people get it wrong because they don't pay enough attention. And the idea of presenting my brand and my brand's colors and all of that takes so much precedence that you forget that eventually somebody's going to have to press those soft buttons and make things work.
I'm going to give you a small example. So we've not been doing luxury cars now for some time, but recently BMW had us over to check out the new 5 Series. Can I tell you what I remember about the 5 Series? I love the interior. You know, I really admire what BMW is doing from an engineering standpoint. But you know what I remember from getting in that, from the time that I spent in the car, the one moment which is giving me goosebumps even now, it's when I was in the back seat. Was it the seats? No. You know what it was? It was clicking the seatbelt. In the back seat, I pulled the seatbelt over. I did not have to look down. My hand went down by reflex. The seatbelt buckle was there.
Yeah.
I did it again once more later, saying that maybe I just
got lucky. Yeah.
It was at the right spot. And these are the small things when you see in cars which are designed around you. These are the things that will really matter and will make every time you experience in the car that little bit richer, that little bit more satisfying.
Yeah.
These are the things that you will not see in a brochure, because there's no way to put this in a brochure saying that the seatbelt buckle is right where you want it.
Yeah.
It's not going to be there. But what we'll instead talk about are inflator. I mean, what now? The other thing which I think Mercedes does, seatbelt airbag. That sounds cool.
Why does the seatbelt need an airbag? What are we protecting it from?
Chest.
Oh, you're protecting the human who's wearing
for the at the rear.
Oh, so they can increase the force limit.
So it just more absorption. Otherwise, that seatbelt also crushes your rib cage and all, right? So that way. So anyway,
we can't have that.
So that kind of stuff. I think it's easy to get carried away with cars, especially because it's... And okay, the reason why you should be extra cautious about this is I can sell you a car which is basically a room with 4 wheels, an engine, the tires, whatever, the basics to keep you on the road, and that thing will work and work and work, and you'll have no complaints of it.
So ETOs. So ETOs.
Yeah, okay, fine. ETOs is actually a good example. But if I charge you 1,000 rupees for that, versus now I say I give you a music system with 4 speakers, then I say I give you 8 speakers, then I give you 2 screens. I can go from charging 1,000 rupees to 2,000 rupees and you will not bat an eyelid because you'll see it as obvious value.
Yeah.
And so every time you get swayed by features, think how much of it is actual value.
Correct.
And I find it like the cars, I mean, our Ignis is second from base. I wish it had a few more things. I really do, which I think should be standard. But the core of it, great engine is there, great suspension was there, seating position good, all of it was in place. Everything else was like, yeah, we'll see about it. If we need it, we add it on later.
Yeah.
Simple.
Yeah. And I think in the bikes also, bikes are far less complicated objects. They don't have so many systems, which is why also margins on bikes are lower. I was talking to somebody and I was saying, the more things you put into a thing, each of those things is then therefore marginable and monetizable.
Absolutely.
So you can build a car's margins up, which is why the top models become so expensive. It's not just because they have more features, it's also because there's more margin on them, which is why the dealer will always try to get you to buy a higher model than the one you think you should be buying, right? On a motorcycle, we hear things like, I'm not buying this bike because when I took it for a test ride, it gave me a sharp pain in my shoulder.
You need to work out more.
No, it's not just work out more. One is, then that begs the question, are you sitting right? Because if you sit correctly on a motorcycle, usually your lower body should ache from the strain of riding, but your upper body should actually not feel any stress. So the first thing I took away from that DM or whatever was, okay, so they need to sit better. But at this point, if I say, hey, listen, it's not the motorcycle, you are sitting wrong, then the conversation goes to another place only, because he's like, hey, listen, I just wanted to tell you that I rode these 3 bikes, out of which I'm rejecting this because the bike gave me a pain. You're telling me I'm riding wrong. Why aren't the other bikes hurting? I was like, yeah, but this would be a moot discussion if you didn't like the bike that hurt you. You clearly like that bike. Whatever you've told me about you so far in terms of family expectation, use pattern, that sounds like the bike that you're gravitating towards. And you're letting the fact that you don't sit correctly on a handlebar defeat you. You can change the handlebar. It's not a big deal. First, you can adjust the handlebar. Give it a couple of weeks to see if that solves it. But we have rejected a bike that would otherwise fit neatly into their lifestyle and give them great joy at the sense of, yeah, handlebar is not working for me. And I've seen the other side also. I'm buying a Multistrada, I'm buying a GS, I'm buying an Africa Twin, I'm buying a Transalp. Which risers should I put? You are still buying it, no? I always put a riser. But why? What are you, 92 feet tall?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
right? There's a reason why the handlebar is at that height, and it does give you some pros and a few cons. And if you discover enough cons, please put the riser. But what is this? I booked the bike, it will get delivered in 6 weeks' time, so I should buy a riser now.
Dude, I honestly don't get this at all. For motorcycles, honestly, I just I have not got this. When people find small things and they just get stuck with that. Motorcycle is such an intimate acquisition. Either it works for you or it doesn't.
Yeah.
And if something is not working for you, you know it from inside, and you'll like कि ये नहीं चाहिए, ये मेरे लिए नहीं काम कर रहा.
Correct. And on a motorcycle, to further your point, there's very few things that you can't actually adjust to yourself, and you should just be aware of those. Right? For example, you cannot change the nature of the engine quite easily. If it is a YB engine, there is no real way to make it dramatically much smoother. You can have marginal improvements by putting a piggyback ECU, making it less run more rich or whatever. It'll give you minor benefits. But if it has fundamental vibration is not going anywhere. If the gear shifts are a hard shift, you can have time ease those shifts out. But you can't fundamentally change the nature of that. Suspension you can do stuff with. You can very cheaply add or subtract fluid from it and change the compression a little bit without really spending any money on it. In the same process, you can also change the weight of that fluid and change the compression a little bit, or you can spend money and buy adjustable suspension and then adjust it to your liking. Tires you can upgrade.
Yeah.
The 401 Svartpillen came with Pirellis. Then the tire thing happened. Then it went back to Apollos. The law says private citizens like you and me can buy Pirellis from the open market, as expensive as they are or whatever. There's no restriction on that. Bajaj cannot buy the Pirellis. Now, should Bajaj have adjusted the price of the 401 to reflect the fact that it went from an imported Italian tire to an Indian tire? Yes, perhaps they should have. But how is this a deal breaker? If you own the bike for the next 5 years, these tires will be done in a year and a half. After which you're going to have to change tires anyway. Go spend the money on the Pirelli. What is this? A cheap thrill that I'll get the stock bike with Pirellis, then I have a great time for a year and a half. After that, I'll be the cheapskate and buy the Apollos instead.
Correct.
But a lot of people who liked the 401, they enjoyed the experience of riding it, came back to this point of, but they didn't give me a price cut, so I can't buy it. But the big picture of it is in the end of 5 years is the same thing.
No. Are you serious?
Yeah. For example, if a motorcycle has a weak headlight, you can add auxiliary lighting to this, but you can't fundamentally upgrade the headlight. There's no way to do it. This can be a deal breaker if, for example, you're touring and you don't want to add auxiliary lights to your bike because you know the police will catch you and all this drama will happen. Then you fundamentally need the bike to have a reasonably powerful headlight. This can be a deal breaker. I understand it. But a bike having poor tires is not a deal breaker. And
you can easily fix that.
You can easily fix that.
Yeah.
A seat that doesn't work for you is not a deal breaker. Like we have the Himalayan right now. Yeah, it's still on the stock seat. It hurts because the angle is like this. It puts you. It has 1,000 things wrong with it. It's not bugging me at all. It's not bugging me at all because I know that tomorrow I have to go to a seat guy and tell him I want the seat changed in these two ways. I want the foam to be firmer and I want the top of the seat to be more or less horizontal. The slope has to be very minimal. Solved. This is a 3,000 rupee fix. Why would I reject a 4 lakh rupee motorcycle over a 3,000 rupee fix which I can do 6 months later having worked out for myself? कि ये तो कोई issue है ही नहीं. ये तो ऐसे ही हो जाएगा fix. Preload set करेंगे नहीं. But we'll say the suspension is too stiff. But the preload is free.
You can change it easily.
And it's most of these bikes have 5 or 7 settings, which means don't even do the science of it. Yeah, don't measure anything. If you think it's running too stiff, lower the preload and see how you feel. And if you don't like it, go back to stock. Then go above stock and make it stiffer and see how it feels. It's only 7 settings. If you give each setting a week, before 2 months are up, you'll have the best setting possible. And then you can decide whether this is good enough or not.
Okay. Within 2 weeks, you can figure it out.
Yeah,
using the
7 weeks, you
settings.
play each of the settings for 1 week each.
Yeah.
That is the amount of time you need to get used to the feeling and say, I like it, I don't like it.
Spend a couple of days with it.
2 months later, without doing any mathematics, without ever writing anything down on a notebook like the guys who said SAG do, in 2 months you have a result. Maybe stock is best. Maybe something softer or harder is best. Whatever works for you. And remember, people will tell you suspension is like this, suspension like this. The whole thing is about a feeling. If you like the feeling, it is good suspension. If you don't like the feeling, it's not good suspension. There are extreme cases where the motorcycle is so stiff that on bumpy roads, it's not able to keep its tire on the ground. So your control over this motorcycle is limited. That is poor suspension.
Correct.
For sure. And sometimes it is role-based. If you're buying a street bike and it's not comfortable enough, then it is poor suspension. But outside of that, if it gives you confidence, we are done.
Correct. So what would be a deal breaker?
Dealbreaker are the core things. You can't really modify the chassis. So if the steering geometry is not making you feel like you should, the bike is feeling unnatural to ride in any way. It is steering slower than you expect or faster than you expect. If it drops to lean angle so sharply that it upsets you, then you have to work out, will you get used to it or not? Because the bike is not going to fundamentally change. You can play with tire profiles and all if you're really going to go down that rabbit hole and try to find yourself a solution. But it is a sharp steering / lazy steering bike. And if that's not your cup of tea, that's not your cup of tea. You can't fix that. Right? The engine's power delivery you can tweak it slightly by changing a sprocket, making a little bit of a change. But the fundamental nature of the engine, can you take a thirsty engine and make it fuel efficient? No. The Triumphs, for example, are slightly thirsty, especially if you ride them hard. That's what it is. You're buying that. This people will understand. This is the one area where it is crystal clear. Where an efficient bike is an efficient bike and a non-efficient bike is a non-efficient bike, and people get upset with the non-efficiency and reject those bikes. Accept it. No issues there. Seat, handlebar, easy fixes. Menu systems, can't fix those.
Correct.
So I don't even remember that Royal Enfield has that feature where it mirrors the Google map onto that. It is so poorly executed that to me that feature might as well not exist. So have I ever recommended...
Because the screen has to be on your phone.
Yeah. So have I ever recommended a Himalayan on the basis of that as a feature? No, it's outside my consideration set. And remember, my questioning, my thought process is always saying, do I need it? And how much value add will it actually do? Right?
There are so many things. We spoke about the seats because I started with that because that becomes invisible. Ergonomics becomes invisible.
Yeah, and there's no easy way to fix a car seat. It's much more complicated today with airbags and all of that being in that area.
No two ways about it. And see, all those things will point towards a bigger issue. And like we said, often when I see seats like that, I start thinking about suspension. When I see suspension that's too soft, I start thinking about the chassis. If it feels bumpy, I'm going to think about what else is not right. So these are all things that will show you something else. So the same way, when I see refinement, okay? So refinement is super critical. For me, it is a deal breaker. If an engine is not smooth enough, if an engine power delivery is not smooth enough, it's a problem.
Yeah, because and unfixable in most cases.
You can't fix it, and you do not realize that in the long run, it will make you a poorer driver.
Yeah,
it will make you a aggressive driver because you have to work hard to get the car to do what you want it to do. It's going to make you feel restless every time you're on the road. It's going to, as likely as not, you think of it as a value. Very often people will buy a base variant, an engine saying ki, "Arey, baki to gaadi same hai. Engine mein thoda power kam hai."
Correct.
Let's say that engine is actually a weak engine. But the point is, you saved, let's say, ₹1,00,000 by not getting the more powerful engine. But at the end of the day, that 10 lakh rupee vehicle, if you're going to use it less or enjoy it less, have you got better value for money or worse value for money?
Yeah, absolutely.
You cannot take away from the fact that a better engine, a better driving experience is built on these few core things, and everything else is built around it to make it more attractive.
Yeah.
It's not to help you travel better. It's to just make it a easier sell.
Yeah.
So the niggles are invariably the ones that become deal breakers, are the ones which will be invisible in cars.
Correct.
So the heat you will not feel. Ab AC, जैसे हम Skoda VW, it has an air conditioning system, it has a touch panel, it's all cool. But started up like the other day, my brother he called me. He lives in Nagpur, my cousin, and he was on the verge of buying that. So I told him what I thought of the suspension. I told him, just remember one thing: you're in Nagpur on a summer afternoon. When you start that thing up,
you'll be touching that panel a lot.
You're going to be waiting. You're not going to enjoy that experience, and that is a deal breaker. It's maybe a niggle for somebody living in Kashmir, maybe.
Sure.
But when you're living in Nagpur, it's a proper deal breaker.
Yeah.
So these are things that are so much harder to find in cars, I feel. There are some, and harder and harder still now because the baseline has gotten better.
Yeah, of course.
There's no two ways about it. The most obvious ones are coming down to the technology aspects. And I want less. As much as we are going further and further into more tech, the less they have, the better it is, because very few of them are genuinely useful and very few of them are executed well. So ADAS nahi chahiye. We have been recommending regularly that if you can buy a variant without ADAS, go for it.
Yeah.
And most recently, the example with the 3XO with its ADAS and its everything else, all those intimations and the warning chimes and everything. I don't want to live with that, and for me that is a deal breaker. Somebody may say that, "Arey, theek hai, kya baat hai? Awaaz hi to kar raha hai, beep kar raha hai," but it's so painful. It just eats into the driving experience.
Yeah.
I don't want it. That's not what a car is supposed to do to my driving experience.
Yeah.
So it cannot work that way.
No.
So anything to do, and we are using electronics more and more with our drivetrains and everything, the basic hardware has to be great for the experience to be great.
Correct.
And an example of this is like previously with the Hyundai DCTs. I would not buy them. Not because, people are worried about reliability and stuff like that. They were not a DCT experience. It wasn't good enough. It was not, everybody is going towards dual clutches because efficiency is going to get better with dual clutches. And that is key to everyone because emissions matter. So that's where the real impact is going to be.
Right.
But the dual clutch experience was, it was not even as good as the torque converter.
There's a clutch transmission.
Oh, good one. It was 100%. It was like, huh? Then it would go. It was really sad. So, you look at that, no matter what you do with everything else around it, but if the gearbox itself is slow.
Correct. What can the software do?
Yeah. And in that case, I would have picked an IMT any day over the dual clutch, saying that it's okay. I will. So that case, is that a deal breaker? It being slow? Yes, it is for me.
Yeah.
Because when I'm paying money for that gearbox,
It better work.
It better work. I'm paying less for that IMT. It's simpler. You have to put in some work, but it's doing what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line. Is it doing what the bike does as per my expectations?
Correct.
That I think becomes the filter for it matters or it doesn't.
Yeah.
If it's meeting my expectations of how I wanted to behave, because then you'll enjoy it.
Yeah.
It'll engage you.
Yeah,
it'll drive you.
Yeah, exactly, Kartik. If a car doesn't do what you expect it to do in terms of how it drives and how it feels to drive, then the world's best AC is of no consequence.
Absolutely.
You're going nowhere with that car.
When the Veyron came out, we went and drove it in
Mulsanne.
Mulsanne. So this was the Veyron, first car, 1,000 horsepower, insane, 1,200 horsepower. Went there, drove it, came back. I was all the respect for the engineering that has gone into creating that machine. But did that car talk to me?
No.
Not at all. Not at all. Did I ever? I've driven the Lexus LFA. You were also there for that.
Yep.
The car that bombed, nobody really gave a crap about that car. It was nowhere in the legion of supercars.
Correct.
But I always think back to the LFA as the car that I would want to have. With that, it had an AMT gearbox effectively.
Yeah.
Its in-car infotainment and everything was so Japanese. You couldn't make sense of it.
No.
It took you time to just understand what's happening.
Yeah.
But which car do I remember?
Correct.
It's the LFA.
Yeah.
I know we didn't drive it on the road. We drove it on the track. From all the other reviews that I read after that was that, okay, the suspension is not great. Okay, this is not going to be the quickest car. I don't care.
Yeah, I felt great.
It felt fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's, in some form and fashion, that's what we have to look for, no matter whether it's bikes, like scooters, man. I love scooters because they talk to you. I don't know, there's this simplicity. But there are some scooters that just feel anodyne, like they're washing machines. They're just, that they're there to do a job. And the Scooty Zest.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. No, and that's what I was coming to. Look, as an action plan, we have to be able to identify what are the core assets of a vehicle that are non-negotiable. And this non-negotiable is your personal perspective of non-negotiable. If you're an enthusiastic driver or rider, then the way power is delivered, the way a thing turns, how it brakes, these three attributes have to be very, very high order competent. It should make you feel things. And it is okay if it is feeling slightly beyond your reach, because remember, you will also grow. You're not going to be the kind of driver you are today. If you buy something sporty, that car will teach you a few things. Whatever rider you are, if you buy something sporty, it will teach you a few things. Back in the day when the bikes were limited on the ground, they'd say you should have a Royal Enfield in your life once. RD350 is when I was buying. I said, why? He said that bike has such complicated handling that to be able to make it dance to your tune, you have to become better as a rider. So will you enjoy riding it? Perhaps not. It's not your kind of bike, but you should really ride a Royal Enfield. I said, why? I said, you'll become a better rider for it, because a lot of your input is required to make that generation's Royal Enfield work.
Okay.
In the same way, you can buy a 390 Duke, and if I could guarantee that you'd never have a crash, or at least not a serious one, you'd learn a lot from that motorcycle, because it demands skill from you. It will not let you relax. It will not let you ride it casually, which is why we are so afraid to recommend that bike without asking 30 questions about who are you first.
Correct.
Whereas the 250 Duke doesn't pose this challenge. The chassis is the 390 chassis, not even operating anywhere close to its limit. So you can't really upset it. The engine is a sweetheart and a non-KTM engine, effectively, for all practical purposes, right? So it's easy to recommend this bike. So 3 points we've talked about: engine, cornering, braking. These 3 have to clearly meet your agenda. If your agenda is I want to chill with my family, it should meet that agenda. If your idea is I want to be enthusiastic and have fun with it, it has to meet that agenda. Whatever your personal agenda is, it has to do those things. These are non-negotiable, because these are very hard to fix later. Once this is done comes the next set of considerations, which are less important than the first ones. There, again, your personal judgments will apply. If you're going to travel with your family a lot, then all the seats need to be extremely comfortable. If you're going to be driving by yourself, you don't need all the seats to be comfortable. Reasonable comfort is okay, but the driver's seat should be excellent, because you'll spend a lot of time there. If you're chauffeur driven, then the rear seat has to be great, but the chauffeur's comfort is not as important as yours. I'm not saying being inhumane about it. He's not going to sit on a metal stool and drive. He's still getting a full-size seat. But your seat is more important, because that's what you're buying the car for.
Yeah.
If you're living in Nagpur, for example, the air conditions efficiency is a critical criteria for whether you'll be able to drive this car peacefully all year or not. But in Kashmir, the heater might be more important than the cooler. Right? Then comes the rest of the features. And remember, the fear of missing out is a marketing thing. Okay? It's fear of over-marketing as far as I am concerned. Because you're given this idea that if I do this, then I'm missing out on all of this. That's how human civilization works. Right? He has family, so he can only have one bike. I don't have family, so I can have 3 bikes. There are pros and cons to both sides of this picture. Would I rather not have a family and 3 bikes? Is a choice that I have to make, and he has to make. He has chosen family over bikes, and I chose bikes over family. Our lives are going on different paths. I can't say either of us are doing badly, though. You're happy with the choice you've made. I'm happy with the choice I've made. He has a few regrets in the process. I have a few regrets in the process. How can you have everything?
No.
There is a term, okay, it goes back to before the internet. It says you can't have your cake and eat it.
Yeah.
That's fear of missing out.
Yeah.
The only way to do that is to buy 2 cakes. You are going to miss out on something. It is endemic to it. I mean, by the fact that we are sitting in this room recording this podcast, I'm missing out on something that's happening outside this room. In theory, this is 40 minutes Kartik and I could have spent riding a motorcycle. That's what we just missed out on. But this is the choice we made. You're going to have to make a choice. And you have to live with that choice, whether it brings rewards or consequences. What are you afraid of?
You know, as kids growing up, you're fed that very romantic notion that one day you'll fall in love with somebody, and that typical your fairy tale stuff, right? You fall in love, and then there's that happy ending, and it's what is that? What was the last line typically in the fairy tales? They lived happily ever after.
Correct.
Life doesn't work that way. And I must say, I'm childish enough, and it's Vanita who told me, you know, because when we got married, we were love marriage, and everybody's like, wow, that's so nice and all. But the point was, just because you knew each other well, let's say I mean, more than most people would if they had an arranged marriage or something, doesn't mean that you don't have friction after that.
Yeah.
It's not that you're still not learning about the other person and adjusting to that person, right? You're 2 people spending time together for, every day together. And that's the same thing with your machine. Every day you're going to be doing something different, and your expectations and the other party, in this case your motorcycle, what it's designed for, will be different. It's not going to be exactly the same. So somewhere you find that balance where it works. And that is a daily thing, I mean, like simple things like on bikes, one day the pressure is low. Is it your fault? Is it the bike's fault? No, it's not. Yaar, ho jata hai. It's normal. It's part of the process. Go fill it up, ride again, see if it feels right. Temperature is high. It's colder today. Whatever. Just find the right thing and work with it. There are not so many deal breakers. If it's good, it's feeling good, we could be riding instead of doing all this. Yeah. I think that there's too much. I think the more well off we are.
Yeah.
In life, the more money we have, strangely enough, the more painful we become.
I think that's a choice we make. I think that's the key thing here. You're choosing to have pain in your life from a thing that doesn't have to cause any pain at all. You're choosing to worry when there's no reason to worry. It's like I test 1,000 vehicles over the X number of years. I have never worried about the fact that I will get bored on something. I also don't have an expectation. So somebody yesterday asked me, which bike? Something about some upcoming bike. Guerrilla. The Royal Enfield Guerrilla. How do you think that bike will be? I don't know. But you should know, no? It will be the Himalayan frame. It will have 17-inch wheels. It will have that Sherpa engine. I said, yeah, but how it comes together, I don't know.
Exactly.
If Royal Enfield, for example, hits one out of the park at a genius level, where the world has to sit up and take notice, then the Guerrilla will be the world's best sport naked. They could also make a mistake. Statistically, the chances today of them making a horrible mistake are nearly zero. But if they were to make the mistake, they'd make a bike that is even worse than Java or a Honda 350. This spectrum is possible. How much do I worry about this? Even if I'm a prospective owner, can I actually worry about the Guerrilla before Royal Enfield reveals on the information? I consume all the spy shots, I read all the stories. Can this lead to any result at all outside of the one action that you can take? Which is to call the Royal Enfield dealer next to you and say, I would like to pre-book the Guerrilla, where he will say, officially booking khula nahi hai. So you'll say, yeah, but I'm willing to give you money to put my name on the list and I'll come and close the paperwork once they open the bookings. इसके अलावा तुम कुछ कर सकते हो क्या?
कुछ भी नहीं.
So until Royal Enfield says, here's the bike, this is the spec, this is the price, you can't even do the booking. Then comes the question of taking a test ride, reading a review, forming the opinion, saying, yeah, it is everything I imagined or it's not. What is all this worrying going to achieve though? But this thing is, just remember guys, if every niggle starts turning into a deal breaker, you're effectively painting the floor of a room and forgetting that you should be next to a door when you finish painting. Otherwise, you're stuck in the room until the paint dries. You guys are painting yourself into a corner. Life is hard. It's not fair. And things are not going to go your way. There's still joy to be had and there's still fun to be had. And machines that don't do everything you expect will still give you joy if you look in the right places. You're not going to miss out on anything. Or conversely, if you prefer, whatever you do, you're missing out on something. So stop worrying about it.
And for the car guys, look a little bit more closely. I think there are some great cars out there. They might be under the radar. There are some cars that will feel more appealing. But are they right for you? Those are questions that you need to answer looking at what your needs are and whether the car really delivers on it. Don't just go on the surface value of it. You have to look closer. Don't think of it as a living room on wheels.
Yeah.
Please don't.
Yeah, and I'll give you just one last idea, okay? If you don't trust a brand, don't buy their products, okay? This happened because somebody went on this long-winded discussion about a Himalayan 450 on my DMs. And it was going back and forth saying, I like this, I don't like this, I took a test ride. At the end, he says, I used to have a late 90s Royal Enfield in the era when they were not that reliable, etc. And he had a horrible time with, was it a 500 or 350? I forget, but it was one of the two bullet type machines.
Yeah.
So I don't trust them. Will it be reliable? This reliable thing became a sticky thing, man. It just went in circles and circles. And I'm saying, listen, it's a brand new engine, brand new motorcycle. How do I tell you if it's going to be reliable or not?
Correct.
Over the last 5 or 6 years, what Royal Enfield has done, they've reasonably got the reliability thing covered. They've reasonably got quality covered. They're not making terrible motorcycles. My expectation is not much is going to happen to this bike. Yeah, but it has vibration. Yes, it does have some amount of vibration. It's far from what it used to be. If you're taking your motorcycle from the late 90s as a reference, I believe that you'll be able to live with it. But this kept going back to, but my bike was unreliable, my bike was... I said, so if you don't trust them, why the hell are you buying this bike? Why don't you buy something else? I keep feeling like if I buy something else, I'll miss out on the Himalayan. Oh, then buy it.
Oh, why? ये तो सही है.
But he's paralyzed by the idea saying, I don't enjoy this brand. They have a product that seems vaguely attractive. But instead of lowering my barriers, I'm going to stay in the middle and pendulum between the idea of saying, I hate Royal Enfield, I love Himalayan. I hate Royal Enfield, I hate Himalayan. You're not going to end up buying anything. You're going to be here for 6, 8, 10 months of your life, which you'll never get back, thinking about, bike लूँ या brand को hate करूँ. यार अगर brand if is not working for you, just don't buy their products. It's that simple.
And even in that, I feel that at least for me, I think of every product as independent of the brand also.
Yeah. I'm saying, agreed. And I told you the last podcast that I'm a product-oriented person. I don't really have allegiance to brands, right?
Correct.
But if you can't trust a brand fundamentally, forget what they make. Well, for example, when I see Ola Electric online, I only see people complaining about their scooters. Therefore, whether they have a 70,000 rupee scooter or a 2 lakh rupee scooter makes no difference to me. I have no further interest in acquiring an Ola electric scooter if I was in the market for an electric scooter.
And also, you've had your own set of
वो अलग
experiences.
छोड़. I'm saying just from whatever I'm seeing, if I can only see complaining, even accounting for negativity bias,
Okay.
if I only ever see, so for example, Bhavish will tweet something like, we built the first scooter that balances itself, which I think he did on last Independence Day. The reply to that has 2,000 people saying, मेरे को registration नहीं हुआ, मेरा service नहीं हुआ, my scooter broke down, please help me. If this is what is the overall picture I am getting, it is very obvious that this is not my kind of brand, because remember what I said, if my bike is not reliable, it's out. It is not going to be in my garage. If that's what I'm seeing, I am no interest in this. As a tester, obviously, I can't recommend products that look like this in any case. And we had a bad testing experience. I'm saying leave that aside. This is what I'm seeing. As a contrasting example, when you see an Ather thing like this, you do see people complaining. But it's not 30 out of 30. It is 1 out of 30. 1 out of 30 I can live with. We are India. We are a difficult country in terms of the terrain that we go through. And we do damage our products in ways that manufacturers haven't thought of yet. This happens to cars also. So 2 out of 30 to me is an acceptable ratio, which basically means Ather must be making good scooters by inference. Of course, we tested it and we verified it separately. I'm saying still, leave that out. So I am okay to consider an Ather as an electric product. I'm okay to consider TVS as an electric product. I'm not okay to consider Ola. But when I'm saying I don't want to see this brand, what they do next should not distract me also, right?
Correct.
This dude, he likes the idea of the Himalayan, but he hates the idea of the Royal Enfield. So chhod do na.
Right.
Let it go.
It won't sit easy with them any which ways.
Yeah. Like Honda, whatever they're doing in India. There's only one bike I want in the stable, which is the CB500X, now replaced with the NX500. That is my entire interest in Honda until Honda shows an interest in us. So what all X Honda is doing as a rider, as an owner of machines, not as a road tester, I have very little interest in their movements because they don't speak my language. They're not going to where my expectations are.
And I think that was, you brought in reliability as an aspect, and a lot of niggles comes down to issues with cars, not necessarily characteristics or attributes of the vehicle, but issues that you end up experiencing. And in that also, there are sometimes people who feel that when they've bought a vehicle, and no matter how expensive it is, obviously the expectations are much higher when you buy a more expensive vehicle, that there'll be no fault whatsoever. That doesn't happen. No. I have not had a single vehicle till date where I didn't have some chota mota something or the other. But the difference between it being a niggle and a deal breaker is that when it starts taking up my time,
Correct.
and it brings up that question in my head that, and this is the thing I always tell my friends, that any vehicle that I have is the kinds that should be that tomorrow morning I decide I want to drive from here to Delhi. I decide to drive from here to Kochi, whatever it is. I can get in, turn it on, and go.
Yeah.
Or get on it and go. That's it. If it can't do that, it doesn't, then it's a deal breaker.
Correct.
If that question is going to be there at the back of my head,
Yeah, it's not worth it.
it's not, it's a deal breaker for
Yeah, and look, 100% reliability is a myth.
Yeah.
Nothing is 100% reliable, including the Hondas and the BMW GS that
It's
you
a
just
machine.
thought of. It's a machine. Things will go here and there. And things will go here and there because they didn't engineer it enough, because you are not willing to pay for the cost of the engineering required to make that thing go away, or because it wasn't serviced on time, etc., etc. There's a whole bunch of things in there that complicate this picture. I think you should be expecting it to be reliable enough. I have a very high expectation of reliability for my personal machines, and they will fail very quickly because I set the standard for my machines really high. You don't have to do that. But if you set it super, super high, you'll never buy a thing. Think about it like this, okay? Your body doesn't run forever either. It needs help all the damn time. And the older you get, the more help it needs, right? Like there was a joke that there's an age after which Volini and Bengay, etc., is part of your lifestyle, right?
Along
And
with toothpaste, you have those tubes.
yeah,
of
and it's not considered a problem, right? It's considered a natural progression that there will be a time in your life where you'll run and jump and everything will be
those
happy.
are lifestyle choices.
Correct. And similarly, the toothpaste is helping your teeth stay around for a long time. Because if you didn't have toothpaste, you'd have lost them by 25. So your own body can't run without help. What are you expecting? Somebody will make a complicated machine with thousands of moving parts that will just run along forever. Doesn't
without
happen.
backup. Yeah.
It does not happen.
Yeah. But again, just to point that out, that don't think of recurring issues or frequent issues as standard and acceptable either.
Yeah.
That is definitely a deal breaker. That's not a niggle. Because the idea is that these are our partners in freedom.
Correct.
And if you're getting in the way of that.
But you're free to meet your mechanic more often, no? Now.
Yeah, that's not my lifestyle. Been there.
Amjad, see what he said.
No. Amjad, I'll happily meet, but not for fixing bikes. We used to go land up at the garage any which ways to catch up with him,
Yeah.
but not for that, because that was that whole bullet culture which I
Yeah.
just could not.
Yeah.
I could not get my head around.
No, it's the same for me. Like the RD350s, I understood that the points were sensitive, so you had to keep going back to get them fixed. And I understood why. But it didn't have any other issues. So you'd go get the points fixed and you continue to ride the bike, and therefore that is reliable enough for me. Right? And then you'd wonder if you could turn it to a CDI or whatever and get it to not even do that. But this Enfield thing in that time saying, oh, this happened, this loose, that fell. Oh, come on.
Yeah.
It has to be better than
Spare
this.
part shop attached to you.
Yeah. That actually happened on our first ride, I think. Josh and I and a couple of colleagues were going to Malshej from office. Josh had just joined.
Which year was this?
The LML Freedom and Adreno and all of this was around. So
okay.
early,
Wow.
whatever.
Okay.
So Josh called and said, I've got this spare, this, that, this cable, that tube. I was like, for what? And he used to ride an Enfield, his dad's 70s Bullet. For the ride tomorrow. We're only going 110 kilometers out and then we're coming straight back. What the hell do you need so many spares? So he's like, but we always carry some. No, you don't. Just take a backpack, get some water if you have a first aid kit, which eventually we ended up needing. But outside of that, we don't need anything. Are you sure we should carry at least one spare? No, we don't need a clutch cable. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Yeah.
Enjoy, Madi.
Exactly.
Cool.
Okay, what should we do next time?
Yeah. What next?
I think for the next time, Kartik, since Bajaj has just rolled out a CNG motorcycle and we have ethanol blends going on and hydrogen is on the horizon and electric, and let's talk about what all fuels there are and what's going to happen to us next.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Done? Cool.
3 to 1.
ThisConnect. Hey, stop messing with me, man.
Okay. Sorry, I just wasn't ready. 3 to 1.
ThisConnect.